Welcome to Europe Debates. I'm Richard Milsom, the Executive Director of the European Conservatives and Reformist Party in Brussels. Today, we have an important panel of important leading politicians and policymakers from the Ukraine and Europe in order to discuss the Crimean Platform, the international response to the occupation of Crimea. Since March 2014, the Crimean Peninsula on the Black Sea of Ukraine has been illegally occupied by the Russian Federation. For nearly 7 years, Russian forces have occupied the territory, drastically changing the way of life for the people living there. Since the occupation, people have been forced to switch nationality, language, and even time zone, as Russia seeks to wipe out any previous connection Crimea had to the Ukraine. The people who have perhaps suffered the most through this period have been the Crimean Tatars. The ancient inhabitants of the peninsula have been forced from their homes, with those who have dared to speak out facing long prison sentences. And now, more than ever, the Crimean Tatar and Ukrainian people need the support of the Euro-Atlantic community. Now, this webinar today is live streamed across multiple platforms, including YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also on our website. We're very grateful to the many people that have registered and will be following this debate live. And please do use the comment section to ask questions, which I will try to relay to the panel if time allows. So without further ado, let's get it started. And we're greatly honored to be joined today by Emine Jarapova. Emine was appointed as the first Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs in June since this year. And since then, she has launched the Crimean Platform, the means of raising the international profile of the right campaign to end the illegal occupation. Before that, she served as Deputy Minister for Information Policy from 2016 to 2019. Previously had a career.
Jezu, no to błąd ktoś przesłał, przecież to jest Milson.
Minister.
No ale to ja mam tak tutaj, to mam się połączyć teraz. Przed chwilą nawet.
Minister Jarapova, perhaps you could start us off by explaining a little bit about the Crimean Platform. And I understand you have a short presentation to give, but I'd like to hand the floor over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, dear friends, dear colleagues. First of all, one technical issue, Rustem Umerov has been requesting for the entrance, if it's possible to allow him to enter the meeting, because he texted me, that's why I decided to arrange it. I'm very happy to see on screen all those whom I know very well, all those great friends of Ukraine, namely Anna Fottiger and dear Petrus, for really supporting all those initiatives on every possible manner. And this is indeed something that we do appreciate a lot. And I'm also happy to welcome our Ukrainian friends, Liza Yisko, Rustem Umerov, Vladimir Gallichuk, those really great people who actually co-sponsored the initiative on the launch of the Crimean Platform within the Ukrainian parliament, and our dear experts and politicians, Rifat Chubarov, who is the head of the Majlis of Crimean Tatar people, unfortunately the self-governing body that is being under the ban today, and Andrei Klimenko, who is one of the most prominent experts on the security issues. So my presentation is actually, I will shortly elaborate on what Crimea is today and what Ukrainian initiative is about. So our main accent, and we as MFA, as a Ukrainian state, consider Crimea to be a military base with an ongoing militarization that has been taking place for almost 7 years, right after the occupation started in 2014, with 2.5 Ukrainian citizens as hostages. We all have to truly answer one question: why Russia has been militarizing Crimea, moderating all of the military components, air, sea, and land. And I think my friends would elaborate more on this issue, namely Andrei Klimenko, namely the security in the Black Sea and Azov Sea. But here I have the presentation that was passed by the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine that can actually, that gives the numbers on the military staff, on the weaponry that has been located in Crimea. So since 2014, Russia has been raised and enlarged its military presence almost threefold, almost 3 times. and is going to enlarge its military personnel up to 43,000 of military personnel till 2025. And the other numbers, I would not stop on that. The Azov Sea has turned into the inner lake, and the Black Sea is actually the sea where Russia is willing to dominate. And under the pretext of different military exercises, Russia is trying to control the whole aquatorium of the Black Sea. And by having 6 submarines, it is more than enough to control the aquatorium of the Black Sea. So under the pretext of the military exercises, Russia is been controlling 1/4 of the whole Black Sea. And you also can see the numbers. What is the total area of the entire Black Sea? And what is the total area reserved for the exercises by Russia for these years. It's also, I think, a testing field for the international reaction. And I believe that here we have to better coordinate not only on bilateral level, but also within NATO platforms. And this is exactly what we've been discussing with our experts and groups, and also NATO Reflection 2030, where we asked that the military presence and the NATO presence should be permanent in the Black Sea in order to prevent the military projection and the aggression projection of Russia that we can see in Libya and Syria. So the situation in Crimea is actually deteriorating, and all of our friends and experts have been articulating this position for 7 years. These are forced conscriptions to the Russian military. Within these years, we had 25,000 of Ukrainian citizens to be conscripted. Militarization of education, propaganda of war among minors, and this is that we can even see on the level of kindergartens, where every single kindergarten has a FSB curator to control the processes, but for the curriculum that has been militarized. Political persecutions under the pretext of anti-terrorist law, Crimean Tatars detained and have been detained, and we have over 100 political prisoners. Most of them are Crimean Tatars. And of course, unfortunately, the main target of these oppressions are Crimean Tatars for being disloyal, for not being actually ready to accept the reality in 2014, and for boycotting different so-called referendums and so on. And of course, another very important issue that I want to tackle your attention to is the curtailment of freedom of media. Unfortunately, me being as a journalist in 2014 and traveled Crimea back and forth, I can obviously say that one of the main and first steps in Russia was to attack freedom of media. The Ukrainian TV and radio signal was switched off, and the media were attacked, and as the result, hundreds of media were shut down. And the new phenomenon raised in Crimea, which is citizen journalism, when average people with their cell phones and gadgets started to record the human rights violation and share this in social media. And as the result, today we have 8 civil journalists to be detained, and I'm very thankful to Anna Fottiger that she supported our new initiative about the mentorship program, where prominent public persons, influencers actually will articulate the stories of those average people who are and whom we consider to be the citizens, the citizen journalists. The situation in Crimea is also quite warning and awful in terms of economic sphere. So whereas under different reasons, the Russian Federation is trying to legitimize its presence and also to bring foreign business into dubious projects in Crimea. We had the Austrian company called Hammelbau that actually has been participating in the construction of the opera house in Sevastopol, and this is what we also think should be a very public story, and we are very grateful to our Austrian ambassador of Ukraine in Austria for raising and making this track very public, even though sometimes states that do not have direct instruments to stop or ban doing business, because we still have Ocean in Crimea, we still have BMW and Korean brands operating in Crimea. But another reason is to make these tracks public. Then the illegal expropriation and privatization of Ukrainian state-owned assets, and the most recent one, the procurement of the state-owned Massandra vineyard, whereas thousands of hectares of land were sold for really kind of the number of money, the sum of money that the company paid for the procurement of the vineyard equals to $72 million, which is absolutely not enough for all those hectares of the most expensive land on the southern coast of Crimea. And by the way, the company that has been and is being affiliated to the bank named Russia, and the owner of this company is a friend of Mr. Putin. So we can also see the very classic of Russian traditional doing business. So our response for that, by having in mind that the situation needs higher attention than it is today, we decided that this initiative is about getting Crimea back into the higher political level and the level of attention. So we think that there is a homework to do for Ukraine, and we are now drafting the national de-occupation strategy. So the Defense Council, I believe, will present it in a couple of months, which will be the part of this implementation of national policy on de-occupation, because our ultimate goal is, of course, de-occupation. And tactically, to tackle to that strategy and strategical goal, we have to all the time invent new instruments on how to keep this issue on the agenda and on the surface. So we also have to update the legislation on sanctions, because it's quite weak in Ukraine. And the third one is actually establishing the Crimean Platform, and the construction and the architecture of the Crimean Platform actually deals with several dimensions. The first, the highest, which is the heads of states and government. And we will launch the Crimean Platform in 2021 during the Crimean Summit that will take place in Kiev. We are finalizing the draft of the declaration that will be opened for adherence by all those states willing to support this initiative. This will be a very basic document about non-recognition policy. And by joining this declaration, states would actually declare that they will never recognize attempted annexation as such, or they recognize it as a crime. The other levels and layers of this Crimean Platform is the ministers and ministries of foreign affairs, which will be the coordinative body, and that will actually deal with several issues like non-recognition policy. These are 5 priority areas: security, including freedom of navigation, effectiveness of sanction and their extension, because it really needs coordination. We have different tracks of sanctions, and all of those sanctions are quite different, I would say. Then protection of human rights and international humanitarian law, and I'm very happy that the European Union has launched the global EU mechanism on human rights violation, and we expect how to integrate this effort for the Crimean track. And the final is overcoming the negative impact on economy and environment, something that we can see with the water supply, let's say, and how it's been politically monopolized by Russia, and how the whole responsibility Russia is trying to put on Ukrainian shoulders, even though, according to international law, Russia has been directly responsible for all those resources supply, including water resources. So the other layers, and this is the parliament layer, even though MFA cannot be the lead, but we think that this is also one of the most crucial dimensions that will help us to raise the voice of Crimean track. And I think that Lisa and Rustem and Vadim will speak a bit more on their idea and their initiatives on how this Crimean platform can be integrated both on inner track and foreign track. And then probably the most substantial part of this pyramid of the Crimean platform is the export office of the Crimean platform, where we believe that there are a bunch of NGOs that could and should develop their projects under one umbrella, and from another hand should have a sustainable resource support and support to actually be efficient in what they do. And all those researchers and analytics can be also work for the tasks and targets of the highest levels of the Crimean platform. So this is just very shortly and briefly the current state of play and the next steps. As I told you, we are preparing to launch the Crimean Summit. We had different dates, but we are expecting for Ukrainian president to confirm the date. And as soon as it is confirmed, we will immediately start inviting the countries to attend and visit Kyiv and to join the declaration. The expert network, we also think that what is mostly important is to get the Crimean issue out of the Ukrainian box, is actually the international network with other think tanks all over the world. And this is also what we are focusing on together with NGOs. And the interfactional deputy association, the Crimean Platform, that has been registered a couple of weeks ago. What we think and how EU could be engaged into the Crimean Platform efforts. So of course, sanction policy, another track that we have been requesting for is the launch of the special representative on the Crimean issues, just to raise the track. And the reports on Ukraine, and that could be a profile and the mandate of a special representative on Crimea. Of course, we can also and willing to more actively elaborate the possibilities of the representative on human rights, the EU representative of human rights, and we expect him to attend Ukraine, to travel to Kherson, which is the border region with Crimea, just to actually bring this air of what Crimea is today. So I have some, sorry. So. And of course, I hope that my Ukrainian colleagues and members of parliament would share their vision on how the European Parliament could be involved in all those initiatives. I thank you for your attention and we'll be ready to answer all of your questions.
Well, thank you very much, Minister, for that. You've been clearly participating. I can tell you from the outset that we have the full support of our party and all of its members.
Richard, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Just thank you very much to the Minister for very clearly and concisely outlining the platform. It is sad, isn't it, that once again Russian occupation authorities continue their assault on human rights and fundamental freedom, the brutally silencing of critics in civil society and the media, and curtailing religious freedom. It is terrible. But thank you. And let me now bring into the debate Rustem Umerov. Rustem is a member of the Ukrainian Parliament, having been elected last year for the Volos Party. He's the co-chair of the cross-party Crimean Platform in the Ukrainian Parliament, and he currently serves as the secretary for the Committee on Human Rights, working on issues related to the occupied territories and national minorities. So Rustem, thank you very much for being with us. Perhaps if you'd like to start us off with your opening remarks, but I'm sure the viewers would be interested to hear what has happened in the period since the occupation began.
Hi everyone. Since we are all focused on replying and focus Crimea and the Black Sea, I will be trying to shortly answer so that my colleagues could also join or have something to say. Basically speaking, our main goal is that Russia ends the temporary occupation and leaves it. And that's why it would be very hard to say that the Russians brought so many people after the attempt of annexation or the occupation. It's up to, for some UN digits, they say it is 300,000. Our sources say it's up to 500,000 people additionally brought there. It is a military base in the Black Sea that threatens the Eastern Mediterranean. It threatens our neighbors in the Baltic. So, as you know, there is a huge violation of human rights, and we have up to date up to 103 political prisoners with 200 children of our political prisoners left at home. It's extremely the worst that has happened. One of the most prominent, loyal, active institutions of the indigenous people, Crimean Tatar Majlis, has been banned, and they continue to distract anything that, as my colleagues have also outlined, the cultural heritage, bans on the language, mass media. So it's a huge security threat that has happened for the last 7 years, and it continues to be so. So it's just shortly.
Thank you very much, Mr. We will come to you on some of these issues, but thank you for that. Let me now bring Rifat Chudov, who's the chairman of the Majlis, Crimean the Parliament of the Crimean. He took over from Mustafa Dzhemilev in 2013, and before that he served as president of the World Congress of Crimean Tatars, as well as a member. Mr. Chubarov, I'm going to speak Ukrainian, so on the platform, please select the interpretation so you can hear. Perhaps you could start us off.
Доброго дня всім. І почну з подяки.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to thank the organizers of the online event. Let me say a couple of points without repeating what has already been said. The first point is that we all feel a need for a qualitative breakthrough in the situation that has continued for about 7 years. So the Crimean Platform is very much on time. We are all thinking, what would such a quality breakthrough mean? Is the Crimean Platform going to become a platform, a forum that would find the necessary toolbox to make Russia return to compliance with international law? It's not an empty or rhetorical question, because up to now, there have been a number of resolutions, calls, or appeals adopted by the UN General Assembly, OSCE, the Council of Europe, have been ignored by Russia completely. In order to return the territory, probably there is time, but the time for the Crimean Tatars is running out, because they have always been subject to repressions and persecution. Let me mention some of the measures taken by Russia in Crimea. Some of them were mentioned by Emine. Crimea has been turned into a powerful military base. And when occupiers, invaders set up a base, they need personnel that would be loyal to invaders. Ethnic Ukrainians, Crimean Tatars, have been designated by the Russian occupiers as illoyal citizens, and they could be pushed out. The second point, the invaders, the occupiers, are strengthening their positions by artificially changing the ethnic composition and the demographic situation in Crimea. There are a number of reasons why Moscow is doing that. First of all, as I said, they would like to replace not loyal citizens with those loyal to Moscow authorities. There's another reason. No matter how Russia has avoided a dialogue on Crimea, it does not exclude the possibility that someday it will have to sit down to a table and discuss the restoration of Ukrainian sovereignty over Crimea. So Moscow is trying now to lay a foundation for getting a foothold, a stronghold in Crimea, even if it has to withdraw or leave someday. So to put it simply, they are trying to lay an ethnic bomb. This is nothing new. You can recall the demographic policy pursued by the Soviet Union with respect to the Baltic states at the Second World War. Unfortunately, my time is running out, so I'll be concluding. In conclusion, I'd like to raise this question that we're very much concerned about. We have been discussing it with experts. The most important thing is not just to hold a summit and establish a new institution within the Crimean Platform. The most important thing is to have a toolbox in order to make Russia sit down to a negotiating table with respect to the restoration of Ukrainian state sovereignty over the Crimean Peninsula. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Rifat. And it is a sad story. I mean, this is not the first time the Tatar people have been moved away from their homelands by the Russians. Anyway, there are many issues there. We're going to come back to them. We've got a lot of speakers, so let me please move on to Lisa Yasko, who is a member of Parliament, Ukrainian Parliament, first elected in 2019. She's a member of the Committee on Foreign Policy and is the chair of the Ukrainian delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Prior to that, she was a documentary filmmaker, first focusing on the Crimea. So Lisa, perhaps you could give us your opening thoughts. Perhaps you could also add, I'm interested to know what has happened with all those people that have been displaced by this occupation.
Thanks a lot. First of all, I want to thank you for organizing this. It's important for us because sometimes I personally and many members of Ukrainian Parliament and representatives of civil society, we feel that Crimea, unfortunately, is not in agenda sometimes in different talks and at international arena. So that's why when we talk about this is very important, and thanks for organizing that. I'm the head of Ukrainian delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and we made a few quite clear statements that we're going to fight further of course, at the platform of international organizations. In Ukrainian Parliament during the year, we voted also on a number of political statements that declared our non-recognition of annexation and occupation of Crimea. However, we know that still we would like to have more actions even from our government, even from our parliament, and that's why recently we created the Crimean Platform. This is very important, and it's very good that we have it on a different levels. And recently, I had some negotiations and some consultations with the Council of Europe, and even with some candidates that are running now for like the high positions in the Council of Europe, and we were discussing what we can do to put Crimea back in the agenda, and we decided that it was lobbying for special representatives in international organizations that would be responsible for Crimea, for solving, well, for bringing some changes to bringing Crimea back to Ukraine. And I really hope that next year we will have some good results together with Crimean Platform, together with the support of international community. And something that is very important to mention is that no matter what we say, no matter what we do, we need to, of course, to continue sanctions. That's why I personally initiated the new law that improves the sanctions policy in Ukraine. And also I personally initiated another law on non-recognition. Therefore, I'm really asking our international colleagues and partners to continue bringing more information about the Crimea, more information about what's actually is happening there, like all the kidnappings, all the violations of human rights there. But also, of course, as I already said, the sanctions is as a tool to put some pressure on aggressor. No matter what we see, what is reality, the reality is that Russia just doesn't want to obey with its resolutions, with the international measures. But we shouldn't give up on that, because if we respect international law, and for us it's very important, of course we should keep pushing, and I believe that sanctions is such a mechanism that really brings some results. As our deputy minister said, Emine, that our sanctions law is quite weak, and unfortunately I need to agree with her, because we know that in Ukraine, sometimes we don't have such a clear monitoring of the violations of human rights in Crimea, and we don't have responsibility for that. So, like, if like the company keeps selling goods to Crimea, but from Russian side, bringing them under the Russian law, according to Ukrainian law, it's a crime, but we don't put any responsibility for such acts, which is unfortunately is really bad. And with the law that we currently working on, the new law, we try to solve this issue. And I'm very grateful that some countries who have a stronger sanctions policy, they monitor that. And I know that, for example, United States recently had to put some sanctions on Amazon, because Amazon brought, sold and had some business in Crimea. And I'm very grateful for that states and the governments that are very straightforward, and they don't have the double standards in that. Yeah, to conclude, I really hope, and sometimes what we really need from Ukrainian parliament side is more communication with our European colleagues. And of course, we need your support in spreading a voice about Crimea and what we do in Ukraine, in order like to put more pressure on Russia in order to raise that voice. And sometimes we, because of COVID and because of other issues, we have not so much communication as we would like it to have. So thanks for organizing that. and we are very open. We had recently the hearings on the sanctions policy in January, together with the committee that Rustem represents. We will have the multi-committee hearings between the Committee of Foreign Affairs and the Occupation of Crimea. We will have hearings on the Crimean Platform, and hopefully we will also be able to share and continue further our work with our international partners on that after that hearings as well, from the parliamentary side. Thanks a lot, and wishing all the best from Kyiv.
Well, thank you, Lisa, and we shall hear more from you in a second. In fact, we'll move on to the sort of European response in a moment. I've just got one more voice from the Votga Rada, from the Ukrainian Parliament. So if I could bring in Vladimir Gallichuk, who's a member of Parliament elected in 2019 for the Servant of the People. Before that, he had a successful career as a lawyer, specialising in election law. As an election rights lawyer, he was responsible for launching legal teams to support candidates in election disputes. So if I could bring in Vadim with some of your opening remarks, perhaps you might also give a legal perspective as whether the victims of some of them have any legal recourse or anything can be done, or is it currently standing?
Thank you, Richard. Thank you all for organizing this event, which is very timely. We certainly hope that more of this will be happening as we progress with promoting the cause that we have with this Crimean Platform. The President's initiative is a very recent initiative, but it's already has received a lot of attentions, and we see a lot of readiness on part of our international friends to join the platform and to provide assistance to the main goal.
J'ai un call à 8h30 avec Fatima demain qui fait l'honneur de
for the time being.
Je vais me faire des fautes.
D'accord, tu as fini ta journée?
Keep going, Vadim.
Dear Rafael Nore, please switch off your microphone. Thank you.
Okay, we have some technical issues there. So Lisa had spoken on the sanctions, so I'm not going to stop at that for too long, but we cannot stress enough the importance of the sanctions going on and strengthening those. As we know, recently Russia had tried to initiate the process of lifting the sanctions, claiming the COVID situation and humanitarian issues that it's facing. So it's the evidence that it's pretty painful, though the official position of Russian Federation, as we know, that we don't care much about sanctions. We can easily survive any sort of sanctions you bring on, but we see that those are painful. So that's certainly something that we hope for the international community to keep upholding. We also, Lisa had mentioned the initiatives that we have here, the legislative initiatives to change our sanction legislation. And we believe we could use something to something close to what's called the Magnitsky list, because it seems like those personal questions, and the more personified they are, the more effective they are. So there's a lot of work on the legislative part. We also considering changes to the existing regime of the free trade economic zone that we have with Crimea, because it was also already mentioned that this whole trade issue is pretty complicated and puzzling for some of our international friends, where we sort of trying to stimulate trade with Crimea, but at the same time trying to block, sanction them and block the development of that. In Parliament, we see as our prime responsibility to use all the available platforms that we have to spread the knowledge about Crimea, to spread the knowledge about these initiatives that the president has, and about the sufferings of people there in Crimea, that it's not just about, of course, that's extremely important, the gross violation of international law and order, and it continues. Every day, people suffer a lot of pressure, people suffer imprisonment, people suffer voluntary death threats, and that needs to be addressed. And the fact that the Russian Federation is refusing to extend the OSCE, for example, monitoring mission mandate to also monitor what's happening in Crimea, although I was a witness to an interesting conversation where after on one of the meetings, annual meetings at the OSCE, after the Ukrainian delegation presented those reports on gross violation of human rights by Russian Federation in Crimea, in response from the Russian Federation, we received sort of an invitation. It's all right there. People are happy there. Just come and see. And it was interesting that representatives from different countries, from different delegations would approach us afterwards and would ask us, well, what's really going on? It seems like they just invited you. Why don't you just go and see there? It was an interesting example of how well Russia plays that game, that they open, everyone can just freely enter Crimea. There's no violation. Go see for yourself. But at the same time, Russia is the only country in the OSCE list blocking those initiatives to extend the monitoring mission. So we consider those goals to be the #1 goals that we are trying to achieve with the use of the opportunities that we sure this platform can allow us if we are successful in bringing enough attention and enough support and sufficient number of countries and people joining this initiative and spreading the knowledge and putting pressure on Russia to perform on its obligations under international law and to improve the everyday lives of ordinary people there in Crimea. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Vadim, and we're in total agreement. More must be done. So now let's bring in some European views. And I'd like to introduce to you Anna Fottiger, who is a member of the European Parliament from Poland and the Secretary General of the European Conservatives and Reformist Party. Prior to her work in European politics, she was the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Poland and has recently just finished work on a report for NATO's Future Reflections Committee. Now, Anna, Russia's occupation of Crimea and its increasing militarization of the peninsula is a threat to our common security. How do you see this? What are your views on this? And also from the perspective of the EU, what are we doing and what should we be doing?
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, first of all, for organizing this event, this debate. It is extremely important to keep the issue of Crimea, of illegal, illegitimate occupation of Crimea by Russian Federation high in the agenda. I would like to congratulate, to commend my Crimean Tatar friends, Ukrainian friends for putting this effort. I think that concept of Crimean Platform is excellent. When I see all those levels, political and to the grassroots levels and toolboxes to once more relaunch the issue after all these years, it is extremely important. Of course, there are so many crises and problems that the world tends to feel fatigue But surely Crimea and occupation of the peninsula, aggression on eastern part of Ukraine are too important to all of us, to global security, to not only forget, to leave it in limbo. And therefore it is for all of us to keep it high in the agenda. I congratulate Ukraine for recent successes, diplomatic successes, just to mention the famous UN General Assembly resolution. These are real achievements. Within the report of NATO Reflection Group, there is also mentioning of Crimea, and I quote it, we call it not only the occupation, not only illegal, but also illegitimate, that strikes the narrative Russia tries to sell in the West about, let's say, historic rights to peninsula. No, this piece of trying to legitimize is not swallowed by us, has not been swallowed by us, and we raise this issue as well. Just a few days ago, it was a presentation in Russia by Karaganov and Yevgeny Primakov of launching the discussion about new concepts for Russian foreign policy and trying to find a rationale for new expansionism, and trying to portray Russia as a peaceful country, rather focusing on stabilizing whole regions. I wanted to quote the late president of Poland, Lech Kaczynski, who used to tell that Russia is as much a problem as part of the solution, and after Crimea, it is much more a problem to global security, and we have to remember about this. Usually, Russia portrays itself as stabilizing country, yet Russian stabilization means intervening upon even the fake will of authorities that were earlier imposed or supported, like so-called authorities in Crimea. And now we know that this narrative of Russia has been successfully undermined by Ukraine's efforts, international community efforts, and we have to strengthen, simply strengthen the same direction in providing truth about rights of Crimean Tatars. It is extremely appealing to international. It is true, appealing, and sold. Sorry for this. By credible people, by people fighting for centuries for their own land, and together with authorities of Ukraine of all levels, I'm sure we are going to win this effort. So all the best. Amina, congratulations. I know your personal role, Mr. Chubarov, and colleagues from Verkhovna Rada, we support you with whole our heart, and will promote this in European Parliament with the use of parliamentary tools and our individual possibilities. They are numerous as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Anna. And I'm sure I speak on behalf of everybody. Thank you for all the work you've done with Ukraine over the years. I know that you're held in the highest of respect there. And I know that there's no chance of you slowing down, and we will continue to engage in your capacity, but also through the ECR Party to assist where we can. So thank you, Anna. Right, let me swiftly move on. We now have Petras Astrovikius from Lithuania. Welcome, Petras.
Thank you.
Member of the European Parliament from Lithuania in the Liberal Group. Before that, he was a member of the Lithuanian Parliament and had a successful career as a diplomat. He was chief negotiator for Lithuania's membership of the European Union. And perhaps, Petras, you could make some opening remarks. I'm interested, perhaps, if you could talk a little bit about the EU's new Magnitsky powers against specific individuals, and perhaps whether that should be applied in this situation as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you to ECR Party for inviting me to these debates, and thank you, Anna Fottiger, for again keeping this issue every time on top of European Parliament's and EU agenda. I have to admit that I had no negotiations where Anna took part as representing ECR on different subjects. Is it Ukraine or Eastern Europe, broader geopolitical picture? I mean, where the Crimea and Crimean Tatars issue were not mentioning. Thank you indeed. And so we did it in 2020, and we will have to do it in 2021. So that's for sure. I mean, in order to keep Crimean Tatars issue and to making it as international issue, we have to be loud and consistent. I mean, the fight must be on, since what is the Russian tactics about the Crimean Tatars? I mean, they try to present this issue as almost a closed issue. I mean, there is nothing to negotiate about. I mean, let's close this page and let's see something new. I mean, let's be pragmatic, let's be efficient, as Anna said. I mean, presenting new concepts, new business possibilities in Russia, inviting, to forget history. It would be a major mistake for democratic international community if we follow this suit. And I want to recall Mustafa Dzemilov's life fight. He is a hero. He's a hero because he never gave up, and he was standing for this issue in spite of all KGB, Soviet, or any circumstances. And he's a true believer, and he's a good symbol. We have to pick up from his character and to forward to the next generations of Crimean Tatars. As we know, some of them are in Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, some are abroad, and in any case, I mean, they are well networking with the international politicians and intellectuals. So keeping this fight is most important. I mean, we can't give up and keep this issue as already, settled. Of course, we have to be pragmatic as well, and we have to fight propaganda and disinformation in this regard. Russians are indeed very instrumental and very creative. They present Crimean Tatars issue as Crimea already in a different colors, as something we should see an opportunity, not as a problem. And if we follow in the trap of the Russian propaganda, so we lose all our credibility at once. So that's why having again this initiative about the international Crimean Platform, it's a great thing to have. I'm looking forward very much to 2021, for launching this platform and having really a network of partners and partnerships being established. Again, I think the important thing is to be proactive in kind of communication policy line. What do I mean? I wish to see Crimean Tatars flag being raised in many as possible European and Western capitals. I call on Ukrainian government, same on many European countries willing and able to assist Crimean Tatars by establishing information centers. Crimean Tatars must have own kind of channel of communication and being presented as a captive nation of 21st century by the Russian imperialism, modern imperialism of the Russian Federation. So I think it would be indeed at most important, I mean, to show on a wider scale a tragedy of Crimean Tatars nation, as well as the recent story of occupation by the Russian Federation, and to have active young people being employed in those information centers supported by Western governments in order to repeat and repeat and make this message as strong as possible. We're not going to give up this course because of the Russian occupation, and we will continue as long as it's needed. So our persistence in this regard is most important. Again, I heard a very good news from our Verkhovna Rada people, our friends, about the human rights restrictive measures kind of act to be adopted by the Verkhovna Rada. I do call on Verkhovna Rada to speed up kind of joining of the global Magnitsky network, countries which have that law. The European Union ones, the latest version is not an ideal one. I mean, it excludes corruption, the major crime by the Putin's entourage. I mean, where they are getting rich and influential. So I think time will come and we will amend this law, including corruption as a major crime violating human rights and social rights of citizens. But I think Ukraine should adopt as powerful, as efficient law as soon as possible. That would bring a very strong message again to the international community that Ukraine is standing for human rights and fighting for this cause by all means. And finally, Richard, in fact, expulsion of Crimean Tatars, abolition of autonomy, political autonomy, cultural autonomy, prosecution, and so on and so forth. To my mind, it's a blunt example of the kind of the Russian laboratory of occupation for 21st century. We have to take it seriously. I mean, the West sometimes is too kind of, trying to forget, I mean, things which happened recently, and they don't take it seriously. They don't take it as a systematic action. And I think Crimea presents this case as indeed a kind of laboratory which we have to analyze and not to let any country to lose any part of the territory because of the expansionist ambitions of the Putin's regime. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Petros. There were some very, very good points in there. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the EU is all too often, the spotlight moves away and the concentration moves to other areas. We must focus here, and we must keep the pressure on. But thank you for that, and thank you for all the work that you're doing. You mentioned Mustafa Dzhemilev, who is a good introduction to our next speaker, Andriy Klimenko. Andriy we got to know last year as a keynote speaker at our Liberty Summit in Kiev, where we were looking at the damaging legacy of communism. At that summit, we awarded Mustafa Dzhemilev with our annual Liberty Award in recognition of the great work that he had done throughout his lifetime. But let me bring in Andriy. Andriy is a Crimean expert, a journalist, and co-founder and editor-in-chief of the Black Sea News. He's been head of the monitoring group for the Black Sea Institute of Strategic Studies that focuses on the issues of compliance with international sanctions. So a great expert. Andriy, over to you.
Вітаю всіх колег.
Greetings to all colleagues. As a person included in the same list of terrorists with my friend Chubarov, and a person subject to a criminal investigation by FSB, I would not be diplomatic in my pronouncements. Let me say this. As a citizen of Crimea and an expert on Crimea, the Crimean Platform is not about human rights anymore. The Crimean Platform is, first of all, about the liberation of territory. Because until we free the territory, we won't be able to do nothing for the Crimean Tatars, nor for people of other ethnic groups who consider themselves Ukrainian citizens.
This is something to be understood. We have been asked many times, what is going on in the Crimea? Really. In order for me to be able to answer this question, I need not to be just a journalist, not even a blogger. It will take to be an intelligence officer to be able to answer this question. This is about how to dig into that community, because for the last 7 years, Russia has turned everything into a black box. Crimea is a black box now. Everything's closed, shut down, locked down, no press, no freedom of the speech, of the press, no freedom of speech. Social networks, no photographs are allowed with regard to, all those moments of the military and so forth. Therefore, what we know for sure is that, and those are my own calculations and considerations that I've been dealing with for like 7 years now. What we know for sure is that as of the moment of occupation, the total number of population was 2.3 million inhabitants. At this point, there's only 2 million. And it's not about 500, but we're talking about 1 million missing. All in all, we have an excess of 3 million inhabitants, including 1 million who have moved to Crimea for the last 7 years since the occupation began. So when we are asked, hey, you need to do something for the sake of the Crimean population, my answer is as follows. So, do we have to include the third million too, Putin's million too? So we need to take that into account as well. Now, back to the issue of the Crimean Platform. With regard to this issue, let me share with you some forecast. So if this Crimean Platform kicks in very actively, this is going to cause Kremlin to put a lot of pressure on us. And Mr. Kolemny, eminent part of our first deputy, and our colleagues from the Ukrainian parliament and experts that are going to be part of this Crimean Platform, and our European colleagues as well on the part of the European Parliament, the European Commission, who are going to support this platform. So everybody has to be ready for a lot of mud that is going to be slung at them. There's going to be a lot of mudslinging. There's going to be a lot of special operations conducted by Russia, by Russian secret services, intelligence services, against all those who are going to support this Crimean platform. So what is going on in Crimea in real terms, on the ground? Let me tell you this. What is going on there is Putinism, period. This is a modern version of Stalinism. And in this state, in this militarized state, Crimea finds itself now, which is a threat to Europe. Caliber missiles, fine, they're not nuclear, but they can reach all the way to London and Madrid, let alone Northern Africa and the Mediterranean Sea. So Crimea, militarization of Crimea poses a lot of threat to Europe, and it is the blame has to be put at the door of the Kremlin, of Putin's Russia. Now, what needs to be done? looking at this example that was mentioned here with regard to that Austrian architect. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I understand that our colleagues in the European Union, so this is something that makes them smile, right? So we need to make sure that the reputation of that architect and his company has to be multiplied by 0. So, I mean, we need to ruin his reputation so that they cannot render their services anymore in violation of the sanctions, circumventing the sanctions. So we need to understand the following, ladies and gentlemen. We have this list of sanctions, up to 68 enterprises that are part of this list. Ukraine has, when the law is not that good, right? 1,500. The US has nearly 500 enterprises under sanctions. So my understanding is as follows: the European is lagging behind. They need to step up their efforts. Like 8 months ago, I remember sitting in the European Parliament launching this initiative, how to promote the issue of safety and security in the Black Sea area later this year as well. So we need to try to bring this under perspective to make sure that all these sanctions are not violated. And on the contrary, there's just to be a clear-cut regulation that needs to be mentioned the following fashion: a detailed policy of non-recognition, not recognition in deeds, not in words, but this is about not doing business with them, right? So this is about actual non-recognition period. So that this applies to anybody who tries to circumvent those sanctions. So in conclusion, let me tell you that I share my confidence. We can do this, we can do this. In order for us to be able to achieve these ideas, we need to share the awareness of the threat coming from Putin. It's not COVID or China or coronavirus, anything, but this is Putin, and Putinism is a major threat to the 21st century. Thank you.
Well, thank you as always, Andriy. Now, last but not least for this first round, let me please introduce to you Dorota Dulucci, who's the head of the European Partnership Bilateral Relations Division at the European External Action Service. Before that, she was leader on Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Belarus, and was also previously based at the EU mission to Georgia. So Dorota, thank you for being with us today. Is the European External Action Service doing enough to hold Russia to account? Is the EES taking concrete steps to tackle the faced threat from Russia?
Thank you, Richard, and thank you for promoting me, because I'm Deputy Head of the Eastern Partnership Division, but thank you for this. It's always welcome. Thank you for inviting European External Action Service to this event, and to all the previous speakers for their comments. Extremely interesting, especially from the ground, and especially for comments from Deputy Minister Emin Japarova, who reminded us about military economic consequences of the illegal annexation of Crimea, and also on the impact on human rights. And we have had very recently an opportunity to discuss with Deputy Minister those during the annual Crimea consultations that we have between the EU and EIS, between EU and Ukraine. And this took place 1 week ago only. It was a very interesting meeting, which was chaired on our side by Acting Managing Director Devin. As you know, since 2014, the EU reacted very quickly to the illegal annexation of Crimea, and we fully support the territorial integrity of Ukraine in all international fora. And we use a wide range of the tools to do so. Everybody mentioned sanctions. It's a very important tool in our toolbox. It is always the result of unanimity of member states. It's member states who decide on the sanctions. Of course, there are always calls to enlarge them. We are reviewing them periodically. We are trying to make sure that they are as relevant as possible to the situation. But not only sanctions, we also continue diplomatic efforts, and not only vis-à-vis Ukraine. And you have seen the messages that we sent during a very successful summit of 6th of October on Crimea, but also in our contacts with Russia, clearly, This is our main ask and point, Crimea. But not only, we try to make sure that Crimea is on the high level of the international organizations. So we support Ukraine's positions in UN, OSCE, Council of Europe. But we also make sure that in our bilateral dialogue with other countries, strategic partners, political dialogues with other countries more further away from Ukraine, the ones that may not see Crimea as a top priority subject due to, as mentioned by previous speakers, new situations, new conflicts, that we remind about the Crimea. We make sure that we raise awareness of our partners on this issue. So Crimea is always within our political messaging. Also, previous speakers mentioned EU Special Representative for Human Rights, Mr. Gilmore. Mr. Gilmore is very much attached to the situation in Ukraine, the human rights situation in Crimea in particular, and the plight of Crimean Tatars. And he has planned already visits to Ukraine, which was postponed due to pandemic, but we hope that it will be quite soon, and he will be able to also go beyond Kiev and to see the situation. So I'm sorry for this, there was some cut. So just to finish, because I think that the discussion was planned, we will continue to call on Russia to uphold their international commitments. We will work with Ukraine in the international fora, and basically Crimea is Ukraine, and this is clear EU position.
Well, thank you very much for that, Dorota, and thank you for being with us today. Now, we have got 20 minutes left, and I'd like to do a quick run back through everybody. So if I could ask you to keep your comments to a minute, minute and a half, then we'll get everybody in within the time frame. So perhaps I could start by going back to the Minister, Minister Jarapova. What's the response been so far to the Crimean Platform? And also, whilst you've got our attention, what do you want from us? How can we help? We're listening.
Can you hear me well? Because we had some technical issues. Okay, so all of those partners whom we discussed the Crimean Platform initiative, and this is the majority of the European countries, some of the neighboring countries, namely Turkey, some of the strategic partners, United States, Canada, have responded positively for this initiative. So at the time being, we've been developing the draft declaration, as I told, and the date of the summit. And of course, the feedback we will have and can have only after having this official procedure of inviting the countries to join the platform and the inaugural summit that will take place in 2021. As for our expectation, of course, all of the speakers actually stressed and emphasized that publicity is something that we are looking for. So of course, taking into consideration that our ultimate strategy goal is the occupation. And of course, we can understand, especially having turbulent conjuncture and international relations conjuncture, and taking into consideration the recent events in Belarus, in Nagorno-Karabakh. Of course, our experts here in Ukraine have been pretty much actively following the track, finding the parallels between the Crimean track and Nagorno-Karabakh, saying that diplomatic and political frame is only one of the options, but we have obviously considered different options and scenarios. And of course, taking into consideration the ongoing militarization, the military scenario, and the security issues and the defense issues is something that has to be the priority of this Crimean Platform for us to better coordinate the consequence. So what we expect is actually to keep on raising the issue. As we all know, to have this issue on track is quite difficult, because we all live in our own comfort zone in our perception what Crimea is today. And to find new kind of way, new umbrella, new instrument on how to get the issue back is something that we've been reaching, and I hope we will reach with the launch of the Crimean Platform. As for the EU Parliament and the Ukrainian Parliament, of course, I expect our members of Parliament to share their ideas. My perception on that issue was that the Crimean track of the Crimean Platform could focus on two main options. The inner one, and I'm very thankful to my Ukrainian colleagues for openly sharing the drawbacks of Crimean policy in Ukraine, namely the sanction policy, namely the some of the laws that dissonate with the policy of sanction, namely the free economic zone that we have with Crimea, even though that de facto it's not the case, but we had the law to be adopted back in 2014. And of course, as we call our partners to implement sanctions and not to do business with Crimea, having the free economic and free trade zone with Crimea is something that really dissonates. So this is the inner track, and the kind of outer, the foreign track is the voice, is actually finding, probably connecting with the groups of friendship, Ukraine and other states on the bilateral level, or the parliament assemblies, or perhaps the launch of the Parliament Assembly of the Crimean Platform that would bring together the Ukrainian parliamentarians and the European Parliament. So we believe that the ecosystem of events, of very sizable and public events, can also work for the cause of raising the issue and remaining the issue acute.
Well, thank you, Minister, and thank you very much for being with us here today. Now, I know that Rustam Imrov has to run to a flight. Have you got time for just a quick comment before you leave?
Sure, I do, Richard.
I'm interested to what role the national parliaments are going to have in this platform.
Yeah, as my colleagues already outlined, we have several dimensions of this platform, and one of the platforms is a parliamentarian platform. Along with Lisa and Vadim, we are co-forming, and Ahtem Chigoz and Mustafa Agha, we are co-chairing it. So we're focusing to raise the issue of, or to create a legal platform for the potential laws that we will need for the deoccupation strategy and reintegration strategy is one of the main things. What we are expecting that, or we are ready to conclude visits and meet with our colleagues in different parliaments. And we would be more than, we will appreciate if such initiatives we can do along with Pani Fottiger, Pani Dorota, or other colleagues, Petras, and all the colleagues that are now online. This is because at this stage we have key partners, we have our neighbor allies, we have prominent EU countries that we are focusing to work with. In addition, also on the international dimension, the security is a matter of regional security. So that is why we shall be focused on continuing or adding this track as well, because in the future it will be important in a regional dimension. In addition, our partners can help to pressurize Russia on release of our political prisoners, because this is important to us. This could be done through the channels they have from diplomatic channels, because Ukraine needs such a support. Our, as I said, parliamentary role would be welcoming all the additional helping hand or additional focus groups, including expert level, including security level on our platform to work out the solutions on a legal basis and work the signals with our colleagues in Europe and North America or in international organizations.
Thank you so much, Rustem, and thank you for being with us here today. Refat Chubarov, can I give you 1 minute? What more can we do here in Europe to help the plight of the Crimean Tatar?
Мій друг Андрій Клименко.
Andriy Klemenko, my friend, made a very good point. He provided a very clear explanation of our expectations, the expectations we pin on the Crimea Platform. Let me reiterate, Crimea Platform is not about human rights. It's about returning territory, in the understanding that human rights is part of that bigger issue, because we know that the key cause for violations of human rights, that main cause and factor is Russian occupation, Russian Federation. This is just to explain to those who are watching us in Crimea. And those in Crimea, they lap up every word pronounced in Kiev or in European capitals and international institutions. That means we haven't forgotten about human rights. Just the opposite. We are focusing on that when we talk about the return of Crimea. That's the first point. The second point, if the Crimean Platform is about returning territory, we need to say once again and quite clearly that this gives the Ukrainian state a lot of tasks, a lot of homework. It needs to improve its national legislation in order to demonstrate to the entire world what kind of future Crimea will have after Ukrainian state sovereignty is restored. Let us recall the triad of laws, draft laws that were developed and discussed by the key experts of Ukraine. I'm talking about the draft law on the status of the Crimean people, the draft law on indigenous peoples in Ukraine, and the draft law on amending the Ukrainian constitution with respect to Title 10, that is the autonomous Crimean Republic. In order to implement the slogan mentioned by Andriy Klemenko, a lot of shifts and changes will be required in the mindset of also the Ukrainian members of parliament and legislators around the world in OSCE, in the Council of Europe, and in the European Parliament. In order to implement new conditions, to be able, the time when we could talk to Putin is gone. So now we need to find the tools that could be effectively used to return Crimea. I do hope and believe that we will be up to the task. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chubarov. Time is pressing on, so if I could ask, and I want to get through everybody, so if I could ask you to keep the comments to a minute. Why don't we bring in Andriy Klemenko again? Same question. What can we do to help?
Friends, I think that despite the major problems faced by the Russian Federation, the next year will be a year of nuclear blackmail on the part of Russia. They have nothing to do after all those hackers' attacks, poisonings and assassinations. So they will apply blackmail using their hypersonic toys, the favorite toys of Mr. Putin. They will try to link that situation to the issue of water supply in Crimea, because the additional million of Crimean inhabitants have a shortage of water. We need to be resistant and resilient to that. We need to understand that we need to withstand that attack. So I would like to call on the European Commission and the European Parliament to get involved. For instance, Europe had projects relating to naval patrols. So I think we need to get together with NATO, with Georgia, with Ukraine, and to organize patrols in the Black Sea as a European project. In that case, we will be able to stop the attack, to stop the war, and we'll move closer to Crimean deoccupation. Let me extend seasonal greetings and thank you for remembering about us.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I'm going to pass all of these questions on to our European guests at the end. Lisa, would you like to add to that?
Yes, sure. Well, you know, I often hear that Crimea is about Ukrainian actions, but I fully disagree with this, because I believe that Crimea is a responsibility of the whole world community. We need to coordinate better. We need to put more efforts to bring Crimea back, because it's against all the norms. It's a huge violation of international law. And I really hope that through such conversations, and what we need more is more communication, more events, more different type of raising the voice events, where we could show real facts to our European colleagues, and also to make them more active in this, because it's not only responsibility of Ukraine. I think it's everyone who believes in international law should act to make a difference in this. Thank you.
Yeah, extremely well said. And thank you very much, Lisa. Vadim, can we have final, this is the last voice from the Ukraine before we move on to the European. So Vadim, over to you.
Yes, very briefly. I do completely agree with my friends and colleagues about the need of a stronger language. I put it that way. There's this meme going on about Europe voicing great concern over this and that. Instead of great concern, it would be good to hear that the European perspectives, the perspectives of joining the European Union are very, very real for Ukraine, for example. We would like to hear that the perspectives of becoming a NATO country is also a very real perspective. And the Russian myth that the Article 5 precludes completely even any sort of discussion of that possibility is not true. And so that possibility is there. And then Europe and the member countries have lots of different institutions that are involved in developing the different security cooperation programs. And the recent Security Compact program for Eastern European partners, for example, has a lot of potential. Cyber dialogues that have started recently also have a lot to add to Ukraine's security. We know how fragile Ukraine's infrastructure and cyber security issue is. Well, the whole world has experienced that. So those very precise, very concrete steps could be taken very soon in order to make it clear for everyone that Europe is standing by its allies and joining in on the security issues, those that are the most important, not just for Ukraine, as we made it very clear, but for the whole Europe and the whole world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vadim. Right, if I move to Dorota now, Ukraine has spoken. Based on what you're hearing here today, can you think and see ways for enhanced cooperation in the future?
I think, as I said, that we cooperate extremely closely with Ukrainian authorities on Crimea issue, but I'm sorry. Okay, it works. But we are ready to cooperate, of course, closer. We studied the proposal of the International Crimea Platform. We believe that content-wise, we follow the issues through political dialogues, visits, contacts at the highest political level. Because it's important, the Crimea remains with the highest level, meaning presidents of the European Council, president of the Commission. But we see also the need that Deputy Minister Japarova mentioned of keeping this issue on the high level of agenda for also countries outside. And we are ready to cooperate with Ukraine to do so. International Crimean Platform could be a tool to do so. But we are still discussing with member states how we can contribute to this new initiative on the Ukrainian side. Definitely, once the summit is announced, we will look into the participation of the EU side in the summit of the International Crimean Platform. But of course, this also depends on dates and so on. So this will come next year. And we are ready to further work, in particular in UN, with countries outside the Europe, and in OSCE with Ukraine to remind Russia about this transgression of international law. Thank you.
Super. Thank you very much, Dorota. Petras, would you like to add anything?
Yes, indeed, Richard. Probably 2 points from my side. I think we have to extend a real European solidarity, meaning of solidarity towards Ukraine. By this, what do I mean? I think we have to do everything possible and even impossible to make too expensive politically for Russia keep Crimea being occupied by military forces. And you don't hear me? No? Good. So, I mean, politically, it should be too expensive for Russia, I mean, to keep this occupational policy on and on. Secondly, since occupation is not just a political loss, it's not a tragedy for Crimean Tatars, it's a clear financial loss, economic loss. So that's why I believe there are people in Kiev or other capitals which indeed assess losses which occurred because of this occupation. And this a certain counter should work. I mean, should roll on in order at one time in the international court to present this bill to the Russian Federation and ask them to pay in full at once. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Petras. Is Anna Fottiger still with us? I can't see her on my screen. No, I can't see her. If not, we have run out of time, but just perhaps Minister Jarapova, is there anything you'd like to add as a final comment before I close down?
Well, my final comment is actually my great gratitude to all of those speakers and panelists who contributed to this conversation. Once again, let me stress, as soon as we speak about political and diplomatic frame for our fight for return of Crimea, it is crucial to have this voice. It is crucial to have events. It is crucial to have discussions. So this is exactly what we need to raise next year and the years before in order to reach our ultimate goal to deoccupy Crimea. We can't hear you, Richard.
Oh, sorry, no, you should be able to hear me now. Thank you so much. I just wanted to draw your attention to a campaign that we've been running here in Brussels over the last 3 months. We've had 5,000 of these face masks printed, and we've been distributing them in the European Parliament alongside a written campaign with articles in the local and national media. And we're trying to keep this cause alive and keep it in people's minds. It's a small thing, but it's you know, every little helps. Sorry, Vadim, you had your hand up. We're 3 minutes over, but we can go.
No, sorry, I meant to give you a sign that we couldn't hear you.
Ah, okay. All right, so listen, thank you so much to the whole panel. For our viewers, this discussion is recorded and it will be available on our website should you wish to review it at the ecrparty.eu. And please do join us for future Europe Debate webinars, details of which can be found at our party and on our social media platforms. We hope that next year we'll be able to do so much more as things start to get back to normal. And we very much look forward to physically meeting with you and engaging with you to further our political cooperation and friendships. And I very much hope that we can be part of this platform as a European conservative reformist family, but actually as Europeans together helping with the situation. Finally, I'd just like to thank you all once again. I wish you all a very pleasant evening, stay safe, and I wish you all a very happy Christmas and New Year. Thank you.